New Haven, Connecticut, November 14, 2023. The Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University is a cathedral of silence. Its translucent marble walls filter the sunlight into a dim, golden amber glow, protecting thousands of humanity's rarest texts. It is a place of whispers, of dust, and of secrets that have slept for centuries. Among the visitors that Tuesday afternoon was the Sullivan family from London. Arthur, an architect, and Claire, a pediatric nurse, had brought their 5-year-old son Elias on a trip to the States. Elias was a quiet child, diagnosed with hyperlexia, an intense fascination with letters and numbers at age 3. He didn't speak much to strangers. He preferred to count the steps he took or trace the patterns on wallpapers. But as they approached the glass display case in the center of the mezzanine, something changed in the air. Inside the case lay the world's most mysterious book, the Voynich Manuscript. Carbon dated to the early 15th century, written in an unknown script that no cryptographer, no AI, and no linguist has ever deciphered. It is filled with drawings of plants that do not exist on Earth, naked women bathing in strange green tubes, and astronomical charts that match no known sky. Elias stopped. He let go of his mother's hand. His breathing, usually rhythmic and calm, became ragged. He walked toward the glass case not with curiosity, but with a terrifying familiarity. He pressed his small hands against the glass, leaving foggy prints. "They put it upside down," Elias whispered. Claire laughed nervously. "What, sweetie? It's just an old book." Elias turned to her. His eyes, usually a soft blue, seemed to darken, pupils dilating until they swallowed the iris. He didn't look at his mother, he looked through her. "The root of the 7th sun," Elias said, his voice dropping an octave, losing its childish lilt. "It is not a flower, Mama. It is a lung, and it is starting to breathe again." A security guard stepped forward. "Please step back from the glass." Elias ignored him. He began to recite, but he wasn't speaking English. He was speaking a flowing, rhythmic language full of soft clicks and sibilant sounds, a language that perfectly matched the rhythm of the undeciphered text on the page. He pointed to a strange, bulbous plant with hairy roots. "Calathurum. Stahl. This is the filter. We planted it to clean the air after the great ash. Why is it here? Why isn't it in the soil?" Dr. Robert Vance, the library's curator of medieval manuscripts, happened to be walking by with a donor. He froze. He had spent 30 years staring at those symbols. He knew the statistical distribution of the glyphs better than he knew his own children's faces. The sounds the boy was making, they matched the phonetical probability models that supercomputers had predicted but never voiced. Dr. Vance approached slowly. "Young man," he stammered, "what are you saying?" Elias looked at the professor with a gaze of ancient, weary pity. "I am reading the instructions, doctor. You think it is a book of magic. It is not magic. It is a manual for terraforming. And you are running out of time to plant the seeds." Then Elias's eyes rolled back into his head, and he collapsed on the marble floor. The doctors at Yale New Haven Hospital were baffled. Elias's vitals were stable, but his brain activity was showing something impossible. The EEG monitor displayed waves that resembled deep REM sleep, yet Elias was wide awake, sitting on the hospital bed, staring at the wall, or rather, staring at what he was drawing on the wall. Using a stolen red marker, the 5-year-old had covered the white plaster with complex botanical diagrams. They were anatomical dissections of plants that biological science had never categorized. Plants with valves like hearts, stems that spiraled like DNA, and leaves that seemed to act as solar panels. Arthur and Claire stood in the doorway, terrified. "Elias?" Claire whispered. "Baby, talk to me." Elias didn't stop drawing. "The atmosphere is changing, Claire," he said. He didn't call her mommy. "The nitrogen levels are dropping. We wrote the book so you would know which plants to wake up. Without the red stem, you will suffocate." Arthur grabbed the doctor's arm. "What is happening to my son? Is this schizophrenia?" "It's not psychosis," the neurologist said, his voice shaking. He's accessing information. Look at this." The doctor pointed to the corner of the wall drawing. Elias had written a chemical formula. "I ran this through the database. It's a complex alkaloid structure. It looks like a photosynthesizing hemoglobin. It shouldn't exist. It's theoretically possible, but no plant on Earth produces it." Elias turned around. "Not on Earth," he corrected softly. "Not yet. We brought the seeds from the place where the two suns touch. We hid them in the Dolomites. The manuscript is the map to the vault." Word reached Dr. Vance back at the library. He couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in his stomach. He contacted a colleague, Dr. Elena Rostova, a cryptographer who had worked for the NSA before dedicating her life to the Voynich Manuscript. "A child?" Elena laughed over the phone. "Robert, people claim to crack the code every week. It's always gibberish." "He spoke it, Elena," Robert said. "He spoke the text, and he knew about the missing folio." Silence on the line. The missing folio was a page that had been torn out of the manuscript centuries ago. No one knew what was on it, only that the page numbering skipped. "I'm coming," Elena said. 2 days later, in a secure room provided by the university, Elena Rostova sat across from Elias. She placed a high-resolution facsimile of the Voynich manuscript on the table. "Hello, Elias," she said gently. "My name is Elena." Elias looked at her hands. "You have ink on your fingers, scribe, but you do not know the mixture. You use chemicals. We used crushed beetles and the blood of the star flower." Elena opened the book to page 78R, the famous biological section showing women in green pools. "Tell me about this," Elena challenged him. "Experts say these are bathing nymphs, or perhaps a representation of the zodiac." Elena laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Bathing?" He shook his head. "These are not baths. These are gestation tanks. These are the mothers cultivating the spores inside their bodies because the soil was too toxic. Look," he pointed to a system of tubes connecting the pools. "This is not water. It is nutrient fluid. And this," he pointed to a star-shaped object floating in the tube, "this is the embryo of the new humanity, resistant to the fungal rot." Elena felt cold sweat trickling down her back. She had always thought the water looked too viscous to be water. "Elena," she asked, her voice trembling, "who are we? Who wrote this book?" Elias closed his eyes. "My name was Georgius. I was not the author. I was the apprentice. The master, he did not have a name you could pronounce. He came from the sky, but he looked like a man. He told us the great wilting was coming back, a cycle of 6,000 years. And when does the cycle end? When does the great wilting return?" Elias opened his eyes. They were filled with tears. "It has already started. The fungi are waking in the permafrost. The manuscript, page 42, the folding page, it is a calendar. You read it as stars. It is not stars. It is a spore count." Elena flipped to the famous Rosette's fold-out page, the most complex illustration in the book. It showed 9 circles connected by pathways, often interpreted as a map of the universe or a castle. "It is a map," Elias whispered, "but not of the sky. It is a map of the location, the seed vault, the only place where the antidote grows." "Where?" Elena demanded. "Where is it?" Elias grabbed a pen. He didn't draw a map. He wrote coordinates. 46 degrees, 35 minutes north, 11 degrees, 52 minutes east. Elena typed them into her tablet. Her face went pale. "The Dolomites," Elena whispered. "Northern Italy, near the Castello Aragonese, where the manuscript was rumored to have been found in the 16th century. Elias nodded. "The entrance is behind the waterfall that flows upwards. You must go. The master left the final vial there. If you do not open it before the first blood rain, the crops will die. All of them. The skepticism of the academic world evaporated in the face of the specific coordinates and the chemical formulas Elias had drawn. A private expedition was funded by a consortium of agricultural billionaires who had been secretly monitoring strange fungal outbreaks in global wheat crops. They flew to Italy. Elias, his parents, Dr. Vance, Dr. Rostova, and a team of speleologists, cave experts. The location was rugged, a jagged scar in the Italian Alps. The coordinates led them to a sheer cliff face. There was no waterfall, let alone one that flowed upwards. "He's a child," Arthur said, hugging his shivering son against the mountain wind. "Maybe this is all a metaphor." Elias stood on the edge of the ravine. He looked different here, stronger. He raised his hand and pointed to a fissure in the rock, high above them. "The wind," Elias said. "Wait for the wind." At that moment, a thermal updraft from the valley floor hit the cliff. It caught the mist from the small trickle of water and forced it upward, creating a reverse cascade for just a few seconds. "The waterfall that flows upwards," Dr. Vance whispered. "It's an aerodynamic anomaly." The team climbed. Behind the mist, concealed by centuries of moss, was a carved opening. It wasn't natural. The stone had been fused, melted by a heat source far greater than any medieval forge could produce. They entered the darkness. Inside, the air was warm and smelled of ozone and lavender. The flashlights revealed a tunnel that spiraled down, deep into the mountain. The walls were covered in the same script as the Voynich Manuscript, thousands of lines of text, glowing faintly with a bioluminescent moss that had been engineered to grow in the shape of letters. "The Library of the Green," Elias whispered. "Don't touch the walls. The moss is poisonous to those who don't know the antidote." They reached a central chamber. It was a vast, domed cavern. In the center stood a structure that defied logic. It looked like a giant glass flower, 30 feet tall, filled with a swirling green liquid. Inside the liquid, suspended in stasis, were seeds, thousands of them, large, pulsating seeds that matched the impossible plants drawn in the manuscript. "My God!" Dr. Rostova cried, falling to her knees. "They're real! The drawings, they weren't symbolic, they were literal!" Elias walked to the base of the glass flower. There was a pedestal made of the same unidentifiable metal. On it sat a single small book, the missing folio. The master hid the index here because he knew humans would lose the book. He knew you would sell it to kings and lock it in libraries, staring at the pictures like children. Dr. Vance approached the book. It was made of a material that felt like skin, but it was blue. He opened it. The text was in Latin, readable Latin. "Ego Georgius, Anno Domini 1408, Vance read, his voice shaking. "I, Georgius, in the year of our Lord 1408, sealed this vault. The star travelers have gone. They warned us. The great rot comes from the ice. When the world warms, the ancient spores will rise. They will eat the corn and the wheat. Only the star plants can eat the spores." "The permafrost," Arthur said, realizing the horror. "Climate change, the melting ice, it's releasing ancient pathogens." Elias turned to the group. His face was streaked with tears. "It has already begun. In Siberia, in Canada, the farmers think it is just a bad season. It is not. It is the awakening." The scientists set up their equipment. They analyzed the green liquid. It was a nutrient bath containing DNA that was 40% human, 60% plant. Hybridization, Dr. Rostova realized, looking at the drawings of the bathing women in her copy of the manuscript. The women, they weren't bathing, they were merging. They were becoming the incubators for these plants because the atmosphere was toxic to humans. Elias touched the glass. "We have to release them, now. The spores are airborne. You cannot see them, but I can smell them. They smell like burning sugar. If we open this," the lead biologist warned, "we could introduce an invasive species that destroys Earth's ecosystem." "Earth's ecosystem is already dead," Elias screamed, a sound so primal it echoed like a thunderclap. "You killed it! The manuscript is the reboot! Open it, or you starve in 3 years!" The decision was made, not by the scientists, but by the parents. Claire looked at her son, at the terror in his eyes that didn't belong to a 5-year-old. She walked to the pedestal and saw a lever. "Do it," she said. Dr. Vance pulled the lever. The glass flower opened. The liquid drained into channels carved into the floor, flowing deep into the earth. The seeds were exposed to the air, and then they began to bloom. Instantly. Fast-forward evolution. The seeds cracked and vines shot up, glowing with purple and blue light. They grew feet in seconds, releasing a cloud of golden pollen into the cave. The team coughed, covering their mouths. "Breathe," Elias commanded. "It is the cure." They breathed. The air tasted sweet, cleaner than anything they had ever inhaled. The headache Dr. Ristova had nursed for years vanished instantly. 6 months later, April 2024. The Voynich event is the most classified secret in human history. The seeds from the cave were taken to labs in Geneva, Washington, and Beijing. They are being cultivated. They are strange, alien crops that consume pollution and produce hyperoxygenated air. The global wheat blight that began in late 2023, the one the news called a supply chain issue, was stopped by the enzymes harvested from the star plants. Elias is back in London. He doesn't speak the strange language anymore. He doesn't draw anatomical diagrams of plants. He is learning to ride a bike. The memories of Georgius, the apprentice to the star traveler, have faded, leaving behind a normal little boy. But the manuscript in Yale has changed. Dr. Vance was checking the display case last week. He noticed something that made him resign on the spot. The ink on page 88, the astronomical chart, had moved. The stars in the drawing had shifted positions. They were no longer static. The manuscript is alive. It is reacting to the blooming of the seeds in the real world. And Elias left one final drawing before the memories faded completely. It was a picture of the sky, but it wasn't the sky we know. It showed 3 moons, and under it he wrote a date, November 28, 2028. When his mother asked him what happens on that day, Elias smiled, a sad, distant smile. "That is when the gardener comes back to check the harvest, Mama. And if the garden is still sick, he will burn it all down and start again." The Voynich Manuscript was never a book. It was a test, and we have just started the final exam. Look at your plants. Look at the moss in the cracks of the pavement. Is it glowing? Does it look different? Because the seeds are spreading. The terraforming has begun. The only question is, are we the farmers or are we the weeds?